Hello and welcome to another episode of That's What People Do. You are joined by me, Ryan McGowan, and as always, James Kay. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you, Ryan. I've recovered from an illness. How are you doing?
Well, you've recovered and I've got ill. You can probably hear it, dear listener. I definitely sound different. I can hear myself. I sound different. Some people might...
A little bit bunged up.
Yeah, some people might like it. You know, some people have like a really nice husky voice when they get a cold. And you're like, I wish you had that more
I
often.
enjoyed mine last week. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I didn't enjoy the feeling that went with it, but I liked the...
Yeah, I feel a bit like Geralt of Rivia from The Witcher.
I mean, fun fact about that, if anyone likes The Witcher, the games, when I went to uni, my head of course is the voice of Geralt of Rivia.
Oh, of course, yeah, I remember you mentioning that once.
Yeah, he used to do the voice for us often. Really nice guy as well.
Yeah. Okay, so obviously I'm ill. So I'm really sorry about that. So unfortunately, if I cough, I'm going to try my best to not cough in the mic.
Have you got water with you?
Do you know what? I haven't. No, I just finished a drink though before we started,
Oh.
so I should be okay for now.
You need to lubricate.
Yeah, maybe. But yeah, if I do cough, I do apologise. Now, where are we? It's our Halloween special. It's Albert Fish Part 2. If you enjoyed Part 1, I mean, I don't really know if that's a good thing or not, if you enjoyed it.
If you enjoyed part 1, you're a freak and you need to have a word with yourself.
Yeah, I'm not sure if that was the best. Yeah, I'm not sure if you should be proud of the fact that you enjoyed it.
If you found it interesting...
Yeah, I think that's a fair way of putting it. If you found Part 1 interesting, you'll find Part 2 even more so. So shall we just get on with it? We last left with Albert Fish's psyche beginning to crack, with him now performing his deepest, darkest fantasies with the killing of young Francis McDonnell in 1924. Now, it is pretty common for serial killers to have a cooling off period after killing, especially after their first. It's a time to recompose. You've satisfied the compulsion and now you can reflect on what you've done. And many serial killers go on to lead their lives as if nothing happened, until the urge to kill again becomes too powerful and they go out to find another victim. Now, I think this is evident with Albert Fish after he murdered Francis McDonnell, to some extent. Now, Fish went about his day painting, decorating, just doing his day job. But just because he wasn't killing doesn't mean he wasn't completely docile. See, Fish was still a masochist. He was still whipping himself with his cat-o'-nine-tails, he was still inserting needles into his body, and he was still stalking children in the streets. But Fish had developed a new hobby. Fish's new hobby was writing letters. Oh, and if you haven't already, check out our social media page where I've put up a picture of an X-ray of Albert Fish's groin, and there are 29 sewing needles in his groin, embedded in there, that he has shoved up himself, and they are just well and truly in there. Fish tended to write obscene letters to unsuspecting people. He very rarely got a response, but that wasn't really the point. He just got off on the idea of someone reading his twisted letters and being horrified by them. And I can only imagine that Fish was stimulated most of the time when writing his letters. Now, for context, it was the Great Depression, and many people were desperate for work. Men would be out all day in the search for a day's pay, and women would do household chores like laundry or ironing for cash. Now, in a time where social media didn't exist, the best way to advertise yourself was in the newspaper with your name, address, and what you were offering. Like one woman who was advertising a room to let, and this was the reply that she received from Fish. James, you have the first quote, I believe.
Yeah, so the format this week, I'm going to read some quotes that I've never seen before to get my reaction, so here we go. Quotation marks. Dear Madam, I am a widower with 3 boys, 13, 15 and 19. I wish to board out until the youngest are through school. I prefer a widow who has a girl old enough to aid her. Henry and John have caused me a lot of trouble by not going to school. Their principal, Miss Bruce, said to me if they were her boys, she would spank both of them soundly 3 times a day for a month and give John a dose of the cat-o'-nine-tails at bedtime. I have no time to do this and think whipping children is a woman's job. I want a good, motherly woman who can and will assume full charge of the 3 boys. Make them obey you, and when they don't, take down their pants and spank them good. Don't hesitate to strip them to their skin and use the cat o' nine tails on them. So if you are interested, tell me how to reach your place by car.
Yeah. So, like I say, he would just see an advert and he'll go, "Oh, I'll respond to this," and he'll try to write responses that he hoped would terrify or freak out the recipient of the letter. And in this, of course, it's really wanting to whip those boys.
He's literally sending someone a message being like, strip your children down and spank them.
Yeah. Now, as we go on to read more of these letters, I have I've got a theory that these children in these letters that he's writing and referring to are just versions of himself that he wants. So when he's saying he's got these 3 boys, they're very naughty and he wants them to be whipped and spanked, I just think that's another word for himself.
I mean, he does seem to like to inflict pain, doesn't he, upon himself?
Yeah, exactly. He loves the pain, so I think he's just writing about himself and he's just using the other words, giving the boys names and saying it's kids, just make it seem like it's not him. Now, another letter was sent to Grace Shaw, a housewife who was offering to care for elderly and or people with disabilities in her home. Now, a couple days later, she received a letter from Robert E. Hayden. Now, Robert E. Hayden, he's a movie producer from Hollywood, and this is a favourite of Albert Fish's pseudonyms. So yeah, it's Albert Fish. He's just obviously pretending to be someone else. And you've got the next quote.
I do, yes. So here we go. Buckle in. When 5, Bobby fell down the cellar stairs, sustained a brain concussion. He's never been really normal since. Though going on 2, good-looking, well-built, fully developed, he has the mentality of the age when he fell. He is harmless and just as easy to spank or switch as a child of 5. I am now trying out European treatment in such cases. Prof. Cairo of Vienna, Austria recommends it. He says that when he gets a spell, he must be whipped. They are having great success with it over there in such cases. So you see, as his own father, I would sooner have him whipped than have him lose his reason entirely. Should you take him in charge on the first occasion he shows temper, spank him the same as you would a small boy, and don't hesitate to use the cat o' nine tails on his bare behind. So this is about a grown man who's mentally challenged.
Yeah, so he's saying he's got a son who is basically an adult, but he's obviously got the mental age of a child. And he's like, listen, I'm a Hollywood producer. I ain't got time to be looking after him. Can you care for him? But make sure you spank him good. He's got
a obsession with spanking.
Yeah, well, he loves it. He loves it. It's like that child mentality of being like, I think he's like a kid, isn't he? Now, interestingly, Albert actually gets a reply from Mrs. Shaw. Now, can you guess what that reply might be like?
Fuck off, you weirdo.
No, weirdly, she actually agrees to this offer that he sends her. Not only was she open to looking after fake son Bobby, but in the way as was described. Now, Fish couldn't believe his luck. She's not just agreeing, she mentions how she has a daughter who would help her deal with whipping young Bobby. Now, of course, Albert wasn't actually looking for a room or for someone to look after a son of his. This was just a game for him to get off. But finally, though, someone was playing and he escalated. So firstly, he asked Grace Shaw if she was a widow, and if so, would she be interested in another marriage? When she replied that she was already married and that she would not interfere, and that her husband wouldn't interfere with the job, Fish then replied, you've got the next letter, James.
My dear Mrs. Shaw, just got your very nice letter. I'm pleased to know that you are not ashamed to strip Bobby naked and bathe him. I'm also glad you spoke to your daughter and she's willing to aid you in taking care of him. There is no good reason either of you should be ashamed. You say that when she gives her okay and is willing to do her part, I shall be very glad to compensate her for spanking him. I feel that in part I am to blame for the condition Bobby is in. My conscience says that for being careless I should be well whipped in the same manner, and place both of you will whip Bobby. Someday I hope you will accommodate me. There is a place on 42nd Street, Fleischmann's Baths, where naked men are rubbed all over by women. I could go there and be well whipped, but I prefer some privacy. Let your daughter read this letter. He's trying to like work his way into a situation where he's getting these women to just abuse him.
Yeah. Obviously, he just wants to be. He wants to be Bobby in this scenario, and the more that this woman replies to him, he's like that. He's getting off on that. It's like, you know. He's just getting off on it. He gets off on writing the letter, knowing that this one might be the one that makes her go, "Oh my god!" But then getting a reply, he's like, "Oh my god, someone actually likes this shit, and I'm gonna see how far he can push it." Now, again, Mrs. Shaw responded to this letter in a positive fashion. She agrees to what he is asking her. In fact, the whole showing, when he's like, "Show this letter to your daughter, let your daughter read this letter," like, it's like this dude's evidently getting off on it, and the woman's like, "Okay, yeah, sure, whatever." Now, Fish and Shaw corresponded with each other for over a month, one of which contained a detailed diagram of how Bobby should be positioned in order to be whipped. Do you have this one?
My God. Oh, yeah, here we are. So, how Bobby should be whipped. Belly down, spread eagle, ankles and wrists secured to the corner bedposts, bare buttocks ready.
Like, don't
That's
get me
just
wrong.
some weird BDSM shit.
Exactly, right? Austrian doctor is not telling you to whip your child belly down, spread eagle, ankles and wrists secured to the corner bedposts, bare buttocks ready. He's not suggesting that. If he is suggesting it at all, it's just like, you know, listen, get the boy over, spank his bum, tell him, and that'll be like a shock to him. And it's like, how is this woman reading this and going, "Oh yeah, fair enough, that makes sense. Yeah, I've got to tie him down to a bedpost and fucking strip him naked and whip his ass."
It's not ideal. I just want to interject really quickly. I'm really sorry if anyone can hear bangs in the background. Some dickhead next door has decided to set fireworks off. What's the date today? The 29th of October. It's not even for Bonfire Night's next week.
Or someone clearly never forgot the 5th of November.
Yeah, they're ready. Anyway, if you can hear fireworks, I do apologise.
Now, one of the most graphic letters he wrote was basically Fish was they were corresponding for over a month, and in this, at one point, I think she was like, "I think something's a bit wrong here." So she asked like some advice, and someone was like, "Listen, we can get the police involved, but we do kind of want a little bit more. So if you could like maybe string him along for a bit." And she calls him like "Dear Robert" at one point, and obviously that's not his name, but he obviously plays a pseudonym, so he believes it is him that she's talking to. And his reply to her is this:
"Dear honey, heart of mine, I am your slave, and everything I have is yours. Prick balls ass." What a fucking sentence. Prick balls ass. "If you were my own sweet wife, you would not be afraid of me. Hug, kiss, squeeze you, spank you, then kiss just where I spanked. Your nice, pretty, fat, sweet ass. You won't need toilet paper to wipe your sweet, pretty, fat ass, as I shall eat all of it, and then lick your sweet ass clean with my tongue. I'm very concerned my housemates are outside this room. What the fuck did I just read?"
Wasn't that fun?
There's just a lot of ass licking and spanking and eating.
Yeah, we're back to the shit eating, James.
He wants someone to shit, and then he will just lick the excrement from their arsehole.
Yeah, he'll eat it straight from the butt.
That's like a mobile bidet.
Yeah.
Bidet,
yeah.
so you say it?
Yeah, bidet.
Fucked.
Yeah. I mean, I apologise if you're listening to this episode whilst you're kind of at work, just sort of procrastinating, and your headphones have just sort of come out of your phone or something. It's just James has been saying it out loud. I do apologise.
Yeah, not safe for work.
No. Now, as much fun as Albert had with his letter writing, it wasn't as satisfying as his self-flagellation or stalking children. One perfect way was to be whipped by children, and I'll let that hang in the air for a second. Now, in whipped by children, obviously. He likes children, he likes getting whipped. If he can get both of those, we're on to a winner. Now, in 1930, Fish was in Ohio meeting Mrs. Myrta Nichols, a woman introduced to Fish through a marriage agency. Now, she was looking for a husband to support herself and her 7 children, and the first night with the family was rather uneventful, but on the second night, Albert was keen to introduce the kids to a game called Buck Buck, How Many Hands Up? Now, the game is very simple, and it requires a costume. Albert came into the living room wearing only a small pair of brown pants and would get down on his hands and knees. The children would then sit on his naked back and they would hold up an amount of fingers. Albert was to guess how many fingers were being held up. If he got it wrong, he was beaten by the children with a large wooden stick that he brought with him that he used to mix his paints on his day job. And unsurprisingly, Albert was very bad at this game. In fact, on many occasions, when they go, Buck Buck, how many hands up? He would say there were more fingers being held up than there actually are on both hands. So he'd say, oh, you have 20 fingers up. And they'd go, no, silly, I only have 10 fingers. And he'd go, oh, well, you'll have to beat me then. That's the rules. And then he's being beaten by young children.
He's found a loophole.
He has found a loophole. Yeah.
He's worked out how to get people to do it and make it seem fun.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I mean. That's how much of a predator this guy is. This guy can make kids think they're playing a game, but he is abusing them. Another game that he invented was called, quote, Sack of Potatoes Over. Now, again, this involved Albert's costume of brown pants. And bear in mind, this man is late 50s, so imagine just some old skinny dude, wrinkly man, just in brown pants. That's it.
That's hideous. I mean, I disagree with brown pants anyway. Obviously, in America, pants mean something different to you. That's trousers, but here it's like underwear.
Yeah, he's just wearing brown underwear.
And I've never. I don't know. I don't ask men about what they wear, but I've never known anyone to wear brown underwear.
No. Now, again,
just looks like you shit yourself.
Yeah. Albert, this game was even simpler, right? Sack of Potatoes Over is a very simple game. Now, Albert would put the kids on his shoulders. You know, like when you see dads putting their kids sat on their shoulders, you know, like that.
Uh-huh.
Albert, considering how old he was quite strong and dexterous. He would have the kids sitting up on his shoulders, and the game was for them to slide down his back while scratching his back with their nails as hard as they could. That was it. That was the game.
But to them, that would be so much fun.
Yeah. And for him...
But he's getting off on it.
He's got 100% he's got a boner whilst he's doing this.
Yeah. Oh, this is wrong.
Yeah. Now, one game that the kids didn't want to play was the needles game. Now, remember, Albert loves needles.
I mean, is he going to do to them what he did to himself?
Now, the aim of this game was to see how far you could push a needle under your fingernail.
Whoa, why, man? That's like a prisoner of war torture tactic.
Yeah. Now, unsurprisingly...
It makes no sense.
Unsurprisingly, the kids didn't like this game.
Yeah, no shit. What the fuck? Who would?
But Albert was like, well, I'll play on my own then. And so he did. And he kept putting needles under every single fingernail as far as it would go. And by the end of the game, his hands were covered in blood because he had needles under every single fingernail.
Before this episode started, we made a pact to swear less, but that's gone out the window already. This is fucked. It's so fucked.
It is, isn't it? It's so messed up. But remember, in the first episode, I explained how Albert tried to put needles in his balls. He tried to prick his testicles, and he said that was too painful. So if that's too painful, and now I don't know if you've ever accidentally caught something under your fingernails, dear listeners, but it fucking hurts.
Horrible.
It is painful. This guy's putting...
This dude would be like the ultimate spy. You send him anywhere and he gets captured. He's not going to talk. They could torture him forever and he will just get off on it. He'll have a great time.
I'm thinking of the scene in Casino Royale when Le Chiffre is whipping James Bond's testicles in that chair. I'm thinking of that.
He'd fucking love it.
He'd love it. Now, Albert also had a rather bizarre ritual. Every night at this family's house, after the games, Albert would go into the toilet, stuff loo roll between his butt cheeks and then light them on fire. And he did this every night.
What? Well, I bet his arse is the least hairy thing ever.
Listen, right, this guy...
That can't be good for you.
This guy's a predator. And this is like probably the darkest dude, one of the darkest dudes we've ever spoke about. But like, this is the one I just can't help but find funny. This guy's shoving toilet roll burpees between his cheeks and just setting them on fire because he just likes that.
That, I mean, fucked. But I swear it's like a drunken thing you do with like... It's like a drinking game, isn't it? Where each of your friends, you don't shove it up your ass, but you shove it down like the back of your trousers or something.
Oh, yeah.
And then you light it on fire when you're drinking, and you have to down your drink before it gets to your ass. Like,
yeah. Now,
but he wouldn't drink. He just let it happen.
Yeah, exactly. Now, later on in his trial, the family of these, the family that he's hanging around with, they're like, oh yeah, every night we sort of go into the bathroom after him, and there's just like, burn marks on the floor, and it's like obviously where he's had the tissue, it's falling out his arse on the floor, and there's just a fire on the floor, and they're like, oh, did you think that was a bit weird? And I'm like, well, yeah, a little bit, but Albert spent 10 days with this family, and then he married the mother. So after 10 days of witnessing this woman, witnessing this man be whipped and beaten by her children whilst wearing brown pants, having them scratch down his back, and then shoving paper up his arse and then setting it on fire, this woman just accepted his marriage proposal.
She was definitely desperate. Well, maybe she thought he was really good with the kids.
Well, this is the thing. Yeah, he must have thought, oh, he's just good with kids, and maybe didn't think anything else of it and was like, all right, sure, yeah, that bit's a bit weird, but okay, he's good with the kids, and I need someone to look after the kids. Now, again, we do have to remember, this is Great Depression era, where people are desperate, and if there's this just sound a bit misogynistic, but for the time I think it makes more sense. But if there's a wealthier man gonna come round and not only look after me but my 7 children that are not his, then I'm taking it.
Yeah, for sure, absolutely.
Yeah. Now, Albert would actually go on to have 3 marriages, all without divorcing the last one, so he's a bigamist at that. He generally moved on when the lady in question kind of didn't show the same levels of sadism than Fish. So if we can go back to those letters that he was writing to Mrs. Shaw, when he proposed marriage to her and was like, are you married? Because obviously when she replied in a similar tone to what he was going for, he was like, oh my God, I need to marry this woman. But that's kind of what he looks for in his women. He's like, listen, are you kind of cool with a bit of, bit of slapping, bit of whipping, bit of, spanking? And if they are, he's like, okay, I can play with this. I can work with this. But if they're kind of not interested, he moves on real quick.
I mean, I'm sure some people listening to this are like a little bit of slap and tickle. Like, it's just how it goes. Yeah. But I think that there is a line.
100% there is a line. Yeah. Now, back in New York, it's May 1928. A classified ad in the New York World reading, quote, young man, 18, wishes position in the country, Edward Budd, 406 West, 15th Street. And who should happen to read that but none other than Albert Fish. Now, he's still got that failed penis mutilation on his mind. Do you remember last week he went to the Waxworks Museum?
Oh, yep.
Yeah. Now, here might be an opportunity. This is a young man of 18 who's looking to leave the city. If the boy never came home, you could easily explain that away as him moving out west or deciding never to come back to his own, of his own accord. Now, he's an adult technically, so no one's really going to bat an eyelid if this 18-year-old sort of disappears. So, 2 days later, Albert came knocking at the door of Edward Budd. Now, what he found was a cramped apartment. It was May, but it was hotter than usual for the time of year, and the Budds' apartment only had one window facing the back alley of the building, so the apartment was really stuffy and hot. Now, the apartment was shared by 7 of the Budd family. There was 18-year-old Edward Budd, who had put the ad in the newspaper. There was his mother and father, Delia and Albert Budd, and there was his younger siblings, Albert Jr., George, Beatrice and Grace Budd. Now, mother, Delia Budd, answered the door to Fish, wearing a dark suit and a black felt hat with a newspaper under one arm. For this very poor family, Albert looked to be a very well-respectable man. He told her his name was Frank Howard, that he had seen Edward's ad and wanted to inquire about hiring the boy to come and work on his farm. Now, the Budd family were poverty-stricken. They knew that life would be hard for their children and wanted better for them. Now, this would be a great opportunity to get their eldest out of the city where he might be able to find good, honest work and make something of himself. And Delia Budd could not have ushered in Albert quicker. Now, he explained how he was once a painter and decorator by trade. He made a good earning, and when he got old enough, lived out his dream of owning a farm with his 6 wonderful children. And the farm had 300 chickens, it had half a dozen dairy cows, it even had a Swedish chef along with 5 other farmhands. Yeah, I know, right? And this I'm saying, for this poverty-stricken family, they're like, wow, that's pretty impressive. I've never seen 500 cows or chickens.
They didn't even do any like background checks. They just believed it.
I mean, there is no background checks in this time and era for this poverty-stricken family.
I'd be like, just show me your farm real quick.
Well, what's he going to do? Whip out a Polaroid or something? There ain't none.
I'd see it myself.
I want to see it myself. Okay, yeah. Now, but this is the thing. So, like I said, for this poor family, they look at this guy. He's turned up in a suit. Like he looks well-to-do, and they've no reason to not trust him. You know. So I don't know. Maybe people just sort of more gullible at the time.
A lot easier to abduct children back then, apparently.
Oh, it totally was, yeah. Now, with Albert now in the apartment, Mrs. Budd was able to get a better look at the man, Frank Howard. His suit was shabby and scuffed, his trousers at the knees were frayed, his face was hollow and sunken, and his teeth were mouldy. But despite this, she still thought he looked respectable enough. Besides, he sported a rather large diamond ring on his pinky finger, which demonstrated more wealth than the Budd family could ever hope to imagine. So, like, alright, this dude's a bit scruffy, but come on, this guy's money. This guy's made of money. And also, this dude's saying, like, I got a farm. This dude's a farmer. He probably doesn't have suits. He probably doesn't wear them very often. So he's just sort of, you know, just chucked on what he's got. So I think they just took him for as he was. So Edward was out with his friends when Albert arrived, so Mrs. Budd sent one of her daughters to fetch him. Albert dug into his pocket and gave the little daughter a shiny 5p piece for her trouble. When she returned with her brother, he wasn't alone. He'd brought a friend with him, William Corman. When explained about the job, Edward was very enthusiastic, saying he wasn't afraid of hard work. He did ask one small favour though. His friend William was also looking for summer work and wondered if Frank Howard might have room for one more. Frank Howard pondered for a moment, then agreed and promised to pay the boys $15 a week for as long as he's with them. And he then pulled out a pocket watch from his jacket, excusing himself by saying he had a business engagement to attend. He would be back on Saturday to pick up the boys, and promptly left. Now, when Saturday arrived, the boys waiting in their apartment were disappointed when a knock at the door turned out to be a delivery boy with a note from Frank Howard saying he won't be able to make it today. He'll be back the next morning for the boys. Now, this bit's, if I could just pause for a second, this bit's kind of interesting. He's only really interested in getting Edward Budd, the 18-year-old, and then when he brings his friend, he's like, shit, these are 2 18-year-old strapping boys. I'm not entirely sure that I can cope with both of them, because obviously he's looking to kill now. And he's not entirely sure that he's able to do both of them. So this kind of week away from them is him trying to decide whether it's worth him doing. And I think on the Saturday that he was still kind of making up his mind. And I think he was like, do you know what? Yeah, I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it. So sure enough, on the Sunday, Albert was on his way, but he had a few stops to make. He picked up some fresh strawberries from a stand. He also filled a pail with pot cheese before heading to the Budd home. Albert was greeted by the Budds in their Sunday best. Albert handed over the fresh strawberries and pot cheese, claiming that you wouldn't find tastier products from his farm. Remember, this farm doesn't exist. This guy's actively gone out, bought this shit to make it look like he has a farm. This guy is cunning.
Yeah.
This guy's scary. This guy's a predator.
He knows what he's doing.
Oh, 100%. This guy knows what he's doing. He's very good at what he does in a bizarre way. Like, I kind of want to liken him to Jimmy Savile in that he's very smart and he knows what he's doing. He puts himself in positions where he knows children will be there, and he uses his appearance as and his sort of position as a safety net. So Albert Fish uses the fact that he kind of looks a bit like a kindly old man as a way of getting away from things, and then Jimmy Savile, of course, used the fact that he's a big time celebrity as a way of getting around things. I find them very, very similar, except for the murder.
Yeah, Savile didn't go that far, but still awful.
Now, Edward Budd and his friend were out at the time when Frank Howard turned up at the house, but they would be back soon. So in the meantime, Mrs. Budd offered Frank Howard a spot of lunch. While waiting, Frank Howard described his lavish farm. Then the door went, and into the room stood 10-year-old Grace Budd. She was pale from years in an apartment with no natural light, but she was very, very pretty nonetheless. It was undeniable. Everyone who saw her knew it and always told her she was very pretty. She was wearing a white silk dress that she had had on for church, and Albert was transfixed.
Oh no.
"Come here, child," he said, gesturing for her to sit on his lap. Grace was naturally wary of the old man, but her mother nodded her blessing. For Albert, it was as if he and Grace were the only two people in the room. He asked her everything, about school, about her friends, about her hobbies, all the while stroking her hair on her head. And the Budd parents could only watch, not wanting to displease the man who was going to give their son a job. And that's the bit that's really heartbreaking, is that they want their son and their kids to have a better life than what they have, and this guy's potentially going to offer it to their son, and yet this guy's behaving in a way that they're not possibly comfortable with, and there's not a lot they feel they can do.
Yeah, they must have been so desperate.
Yeah. Now, Albert asked Grace how good at counting she was. He then pulled out of his pocket a wad of cash, giving it to Grace to count. The Budd parents watching almost gasped at the idea of this man carrying so much cash on him casually. Grace counted $92.50. Albert congratulated her on a job well done and gave her 50 cents, telling her to go buy some sweets for her and her sister, and off she went. I think that was a power play. I think like the whole maybe stroking the girl's hair might think, okay, maybe I'm pushing it a bit too far, so I'm going to show them now that I've got a lot of money and they're going to like that. Like, I am going to take their son. Sure. I've got money to pay for it.
Yeah.
Okay, let's just take a second to pause here. So we're actually seeing Albert working in his element. So he's manipulative. He's got the Budd family completely wrapped around his little finger with that money play. So when Grace left, Albert seemed to be lost in thought. It seemed as though plans had changed in his mind. When Edward and William came back to the apartment, Frank Howard had some more disappointing news. He would not be taking the boys back with him today. Unfortunately, his sister's daughter was having a birthday party for which he was obliged to attend. Instead, he promised the boys he would come back later in the day for them, and handed them some cash and told them to go to the pictures as a treat on him. And just as Frank Howard was leaving the apartment, he had a great idea. Wouldn't young Grace like to come along with me to my niece's birthday party? There would be lots of children there would be lots of games, and I would take good care of them, and I'd make sure that she was back by 9 p.m. at the latest, and then I'll take the boys back with me to my farm and their new job in the country. Oh, what would you say to that?
Oh dear. I mean, I would say no, go fuck yourself, you creepy old man. But I guess from a point of desperation, they were like, yeah, okay, because they don't want to displease him.
Yeah, exactly. So the parents were naturally a bit sceptical about this offer, but they didn't want to offend the new employer of their son by implying that he couldn't look after a child. So Grace's father allowed her to go. Mrs. Budd stood at the doorway and waved her daughter goodbye as she walked off into the street with Albert Fish. It would be the last time she saw her daughter.
Oh, man.
Okay. Warning. Some may find the next part distressing.
Oh, yeah, because the rest of it's been fine.
Yeah, if you've struggled with it up till now, possibly switch off. It's only going to get worse. Now that warning is in place, Albert, with 10-year-old Grace Budd holding his hand, hopped onto the train. She sat on the window side, and next to her, Albert sat a canvas-wrapped parcel. Inside that parcel was a butcher's knife, a meat cleaver, and a handsaw. Now, people on the train looked over at the old man sitting with the little girl, but all they saw was a kindly old man sitting with his granddaughter. One of the worst parts of this story for me is when they disembarked from the train, Albert seemed so distracted that when they got off, little Grace tugged at his sleeve and told him that he'd forgotten his canvas parcel and left it on the train.
Oh, man.
Now...
Oh, for fuck's sake.
Right, I know. Albert led her to an old house known by locals as Wisteria Cottage. He told Grace to stay in the front garden and pick wild flowers. He would call her up soon. He entered the house, went upstairs to the corner bedroom. He unwrapped his canvas parcel, placing each of his tools on the floor. He then undressed until naked. Then he called up young Grace to the bedroom. Walking upstairs with flowers in her hand, Albert jumped out on her. "I'll tell my mama," she said, but her mother would never be able to help her. Fish grabbed her by the throat, dragged her into the bedroom. He wrestled her to the floor, kneeling on her chest with all his weight while strangling her. At the same time, Fish became erect. Grace Budd was dead, and as harrowing as it is, what he does next, I'm glad that she was unable to experience this. Fish placed her head on top of an open paint can. He reached over to his double-edged knife and began to decapitate Grace, trying to catch as much blood in the can as possible. Once the head was removed, Fish undressed Grace's lifeless body and began to slice through her body below the belly button. He kept slicing till he reached the spine, when he switched to his meat cleaver, and the body was now in two. He took her shoes and head, placing them in the toilet, but then had a change of mind, so instead set the head in a corner and placed a newspaper over it. He then took both halves of Grace's body and propped them up against the corner behind a door, so it was hidden from view. Covered in blood, with no running water in the house, Fish went into the garden and tried to wipe the blood off with fistfuls of grass. He then got dressed, wrapped up his tools again, and wrapped up something else in the newspaper. He was out of the house by 4:10 p.m, and the whole bloody affair had lasted just over an hour.
I don't know about anyone else listening, but I did my best to... Like, it sounds bad, but I did my best to zone out during that because it made me feel quite unwell. But it's kind of impossible to do so.
Yeah, I get that. Yeah.
That we've heard some horrific stuff on this. How old was she again?
10.
Fucking hell. Yeah, we've heard some horrific stuff on this podcast. That does it take the cake? I don't know. It's just I don't understand how you can do that to another human being, let alone a little girl. How the fuck do you have it in you?
Yeah.
I get sad when I step on like my dog's paw and I feel like the world's coming down. So how the fuck do you decapitate a child?
Mate, when I step on a snail, you have that moment of, oh, God.
Yeah, it's just, no one likes taking life, surely. Well, I guess some people do.
Yeah, hunters probably do, don't they?
It's fucked. That's so fucked.
Fish would revisit the body 4 days later. In an interview, he described what he did. "I took the body and the legs out from behind the door. The legs were so stiff as a board. I threw them out the window onto the lawn and carried the torso out, picking up the legs as I passed over the lawn, and went to the stone wall out back of the house. I laid the body and legs as they would be in life. Oh, some fireworks going off in my area. That sort of killed the moment. Now, in the months and eventual years since the murder of Grace Budd, the police could not find their man, and the family were left wondering if their daughter's killer would ever be brought to justice. It's not like the Budds could ever try to move on either. They were regularly sent letters from people pretending to be the killer. All of these letters were sent to the police and recognised as hoaxes. That's the bit that's so fucked up. That shows how weird there are some weird people out there. They used to write letters to the Budd family being like, oh, I'm the one that killed your daughter.
Yeah,
Like,
what do you gain from that?
what do you gain from that? That's mad. Now, they kept getting loads of these, and it got to the point where they just started to ignore them. But that was until they received one particular letter. This is
Is this the one I have here?
This is the one you have here. So this is the infamous Budd letter, and I've cropped it down for time's sake. It's a lot longer. If you do want to take a look at it and read it, I mean, you can easily find it online, so you can read it in its entirety. Like I say, I've cropped it down just for it to make a wee bit more sense, and just to be for time constraints. So, James, whenever you're ready, please read the Dear Budd letter.
My dear Mrs. Budd, on Sunday, June the 3rd, 1928, I called on you at 406 West 15th Street, brought you a pot of cheese and strawberries. We had lunch. Grace sat on my lap and kissed me. I made up my mind to eat her. Fucking hell. At the pretense of taking her to a party. You said yes, she could go. I took her to an empty house in Westchester I had already picked out. When we got there, I told her to remain outside. She picked wildflowers. I went upstairs and stripped all of my clothes off. I knew if I did not, I would get her blood on them. When all was ready, I went to the window and called her. Then I hid in a closet until she was in the room. When she saw me naked, she began to cry and tried to run down the stairs. I grabbed her and she said she would tell her mama. First I stripped her naked. How she did kick, bite and scratch. I choked her to death, then cut her in small pieces so I could take my meat to my rooms, cook and eat it. How sweet and tender her little ass was roasted in the oven. It took me 9 days to eat her entire body. I did not fuck her though. I could have if I wished. She died a virgin.
Phew. Okay. Let's, like we did before, let's take a second because that was heavy. So like, remember about the rainbows and the fresh smelling grass. Like, you know, whatever you need, take the time to dissect that. How was that, James?
Did he eat her? Is this something he did, or is he just saying he did?
So, this is the thing. I'll get onto it, right? Thankfully, Mrs. Budd was illiterate, so she couldn't actually read the letter.
That's a blessing.
Yeah, but her brother Edward, whose ad brought the monster to the door, he was the one that read it. Now, something that is interesting is, as you've sort of noticed already, is how different the letter is to what is agreed to be the correct timeline of events. He details in this letter how he ate her body, but we know that's not quite true. Did he eat her? We don't know. It's thought that maybe he took some meat away with her, possibly. But when her body was found years later, all that was left was skeletal remains. So it's very unclear as to maybe what was taken. Maybe he cut off slices and tried to eat it. He does later admit to a psychiatrist that he tried to drink her blood from the bucket, but we also know that he threw it out the window. So maybe he tried it and he didn't like it. I think, personally, that this letter was his own way of reliving the moment, but moreover, making it worse for himself so that he could get off on it. If that makes sense?
Yeah, I understand it. I mean, that's just heavy, isn't it? We've had this in the past, in past episodes, where it's all like, it's horrible, the act of doing this to someone's child, And then I think it was a serial killer in Japan that did it, wasn't it? And then, but it's just another level to then write to the parents gloating about what you've done.
Yeah, it was Tsutomu Miyazaki, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The one with the weird hands.
The one with the weird hands. That dude was, ugh. Yeah, I think this guy takes the cake.
Yeah. Well, eater or not, it's fucked.
Yeah. Now, the murder of Grace Budd made national headlines. A huge police effort was made, but as time went on, the leads dried up, and only one man really sort of kept the flame alive. Detective William King searched all over the country for clues, but it was Fisher's letter writing that got him caught. Police had one of his letters. On the back of the envelope was stamped NYPCBA, which stood for New York Private Chauffeurs Benevolent Association. Now, police had managed to figure out that a guy had brought a bunch of these envelopes to his home. When they questioned him to be a suspect, they later discovered that he'd actually already moved out of the apartment these letters had been sent from before. So they were like, okay, so whoever sent these letters has moved in since you moved out. And when they spoke to the landlady of the apartment, and a description of Frank Howard was made, the woman was like, oh, that's Albert Fish. That's Albert. He lived here. And then the police had their man from that moment. Now, I won't cover the trial because it is very long and intensive, but it is truly a fascinating case that I would recommend people read up on. I will discuss the main crux of the case, that is. The prosecution wanted the death penalty, which was the electric chair at the time. The defence were calling for a plea of insanity, which would have avoided the death penalty and meant that he would spend the rest of his life in a mental institution. So, question time. What would you go for, James? Would you go guilty and the death penalty, or would you go for he is insane and put him in an asylum for the rest of his life?
Oh, well, this is a doozy, because do I agree with capital punishment? I don't know. But also, do I want the guy dead? Probably.
Yeah, it's difficult, isn't it?
I mean, you've got to be insane to accomplish that, surely. But I don't know if he's earned a right to life. I think maybe death is the best way for him.
Yeah. Well, the whole case, this is what I'm saying, the case is genuinely fascinating. If you are interested, of course, I do recommend you go look up the case and as how they debate it, because a lot of the psychiatrists are saying he's not insane. I mentioned briefly on the last episode, the defence lawyer for Albert is like, listen, this guy likes to eat shit, drink piss, whip himself silly until he's bleeding. That surely makes him insane. And the psychiatrist was like, there's many people that like doing that in their sex life. And then the guy's like, I clearly know nothing about sex then, because I've never heard of it. But they were like, well, it doesn't make him insane that he likes those things. And then the whole thing is about, is he insane at the point of murdering Grace Budd? And it's like, yeah, this guy's, this guy has some issues, but not insane. Like, he knows the difference between right and wrong. And also, the whole thing is that it's premeditated. He bought pot cheese, he bought strawberries, he knew exactly what he was doing when he was working the Budd family. Like, he knew what he was doing. Now, the psychiatrist that was on the defence of Albert Fish wanted him to be certified insane so that he could study him further, because he found him such a phenomenon. That he was like, listen, I could work with this guy, and this could stop so many other predators in the future if we knew about this guy, which I find really fascinating. Now, funny enough, Fish was found guilty, and he was sentenced to death by electric chair. And the jurors, this is the bit I find hilarious, the jurors, they all agreed, yeah, Fish is insane, but they were like, but he deserves the chair anyway.
I mean, yeah, I understand that completely.
That's the bit, innit? And the defence are like, so he is insane. They're like, yeah, but we still want him dead. He's a prick. He's a knob.
Yeah.
Now, when asked about the electric chair, Fish said, quote, "What a thrill that will be if I have to die in the electric chair. It will be the supreme thrill, the only one I haven't tried." which is a bit weird. Like the idea that he thinks he's going to get off on this. That